Hi everyone, happy Friday, happy Faith Friday. So I am back with another little message that I have been studying this week, and it is the book of Ecclesiastes. So this book is one that I think isn't studied quite as much. And so kind of my inspiration behind this, I was out of town this past week and I was in North Carolina, and I went to an amazing church. It was called Colonial Baptist Church, and it is right outside of Raleigh area in North Carolina. It was just so on fire for the Lord, and you could just feel his presence, and the people there were so nice and so genuine. I've actually never been to a Baptist church before, but one of my clients actually, she recommended that I go there because she used to live in the Raleigh area. So thanks, Mary Jo, for the suggestion. And so actually the sermon was on Ecclesiastes. And so I wanted to dive into it because there were a couple things that really stood out to me during the sermon that I listened to, but then also as I was reading through it myself. So it really kind of piqued my interest because I've never studied this in any sort of Bible study, never even heard a sermon on Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, who was the son of David and Bathsheba. So he was a king, and basically kind of summarizing, he was extremely wealthy, had pretty much everything you could possibly dream of. And then Ecclesiastes was written as he was coming, I think, towards the end of his life. And so I wanted to pick out a couple of verses, and I would encourage you guys to all read the book, read the entire thing just over the next week or so, and just pray about it and see how God is speaking to you. But I wanted to share some of my thoughts on this. So I highlighted a couple of verses that really stood out to me. So in the beginning of Ecclesiastes, Solomon basically says everything is meaningless, completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? He's in a terrible mood, just feeling like everything is worthless. The toil, the troubles that we go through here on earth, like what's the point? He goes in, so this is still in the first chapter. He said, "So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly. But I learned firsthand that pursuing all of this is like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increases sorrow." So I know I felt that way at certain times, but it's just, so reading this and thinking about literally by the world's definition of success, he had everything. So I'll get to some of the other verses, but basically everything he could want, but yet he's saying this. So interesting perspective. So I'll kind of get to the point there. So this is in the second chapter. He said, "I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found that this too was meaningless." Same into verse 17. "So I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling. Everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind." This is verse 21 in chapter 2. "Some people work wisely with knowledge and skill, then must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This too is meaningless, a great tragedy." He says, then he states, "So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy," okay, so basically saying God grants all of the pleasures in life, basically. I don't want to go on too much because I want to get to my point. So in Ecclesiastes 3, he says, "So I concluded that there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can." So he goes through, as you read through Ecclesiastes, he kind of comes to these conclusions. And then at the very end, it really stood out to me. he said, this is in 11 verse 5, just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activities of God who does all things, which is such a beautiful verse to me, reminded me of just the power of God, and how even though we can gain so much knowledge, we can study all we want, but really there's so many things that remain a mystery, and we have no idea how that happens. How nature just works together, how literally how a baby is created inside a mother's womb. I mean, it is so remarkable and so incredible, just to think about creation and think about the design behind it. So then towards the end, so this is what I wanted to then kind of summarize with. He says, young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember, you must give an account to God for everything you do. So I was thinking about this and just thinking about, his advice. He's lived this long life of, quote, success. But at the end, in his conclusion, he says, enjoy your life. They're gifts from God. But remember, every single thing you do, you have to give an account to God. So what does that mean? So thinking about when you are young, you still have quite a bit. I mean, most of us probably have quite a bit of time left. But are we leaning on our own understanding, or are we trusting in God? And so some notes I took: fear God, trust God, give our life to him, keep his commandments, and God sees everything we do, good, bad, everything. Nothing is hidden. And so, as he said, we must give an account to God. And so if we're trying to live a life just for ourselves, and not thinking about God's plan for our life, then we're not following God's purpose for our life. So I think it was an important reminder for myself, just to think about that each day and think about, okay, am I leaning on my own understanding? Am I being super focused just on what I need to do, what I need to accomplish? Because that's something that I tend to struggle with, is having a to-do list and being okay, checking it off. But what does God's to-do list look like? God's to-do list is bringing more people to Christ, bringing more people to salvation, having more people live an eternal life once this life ends. Because this life is going to end for every single person. No matter how successful we are, no matter how many times we've messed up, no matter how much money we have in our bank account, this life is going to come to an end. And so am I checking things off my list, or am I looking at the plan that God has for my life and trying to utilize my gifts and my abilities to make a greater impact? And that greater impact is not self-serving for me. It needs to be growing the kingdom. But I struggle with that a lot. I will be the first to admit, sometimes I just get very tunnel visioned, kind of how in athletics, sometimes you just have to focus and be I tend to be that way sometimes with my life. I'm just all right, my day, and I have it planned out, and then I want to do blah, blah, and then I get a little frustrated if it doesn't go that way. But trying to rest in God, in his peace and his plan for my life, and trust in that. And I think that this book of Ecclesiastes, just going over it, really reminded me of that, and trusting in him. And then Solomon too, reiterated that, fear God. Remember, he has an account of everything we've done, and trust in him and keep his commandments. And our purpose is found in who we belong to, not in what we do. And I want as many people to find their purpose in God as possible. And so I see that as part of my purpose. Hopefully, I'm making God proud. And that's one thing that, I try to think about is okay, what would WWJD, do you remember those bracelets? I used to have one of those. What would Jesus do, and kind of what is the greater picture and purpose? So, all right, I'm going to end it here. About 10 minutes long. These have been a little bit longer lately, but let me know below, comment with what kind of stood out to you the most, and I'd love to hear. And if you have any prayer requests, leave those below, and I will talk to you guys soon. Hope you have a great day.